Good morning. Welcome back to the Bible in Our World Today. This morning we are going to start a new chapter. We finished chapter 10 and we're going to look in today to chapter 11, which you could entitle The Two Witnesses. And again, as with various parts of the book of Revelation, there's debate over who the two witnesses were. We won't get into that today, but we will as we continue to read these verses of Scripture and study these passages. But what we're going to talk about today is specifically the temple. We might get to the two witnesses in introduction, but I'm not sure, because there's a lot here. I want to make an explanation about the temple. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let me get my Bible. And I'm going to read two verses 1 and 2 from chapter 11 that speak about the temple. So let me just read these two verses. And John's speaking here. And John says, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod. And the angel stood saying, Rise, and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court, which is without the temple, leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city," that would be Jerusalem, "and the holy city shall be tread under foot 42 months, which is 3.5 years, which would equal the last half of the tribulation period." I may talk about that again here before this video is done. I'm not sure how much time I'm going to have. But what I want to talk about is this idea of the temple. Let me get my notes here. The very first temple mentioned in the Bible that referring to Israel would be the temple that David wanted to build, but that responsibility was given to his son Solomon. Prior to that, there was the tabernacle that they had in the wilderness. Now a temple is built. Solomon builds it. And then that temple is destroyed. I don't have a date on when it was destroyed, but we know that Nebuchadnezzar came in around 586 and conquered Israel, so the temple would have been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar eventually. Now, the next temple that is mentioned in the Bible is when Ezra and Nehemiah come back from the captivity, and they begin the rebuilding process of the walls and of the temple itself. Now, some say that this is, they designate it Zerubbabel's temple. Well, Zerubbabel was right in that time period of Ezra and Nehemiah. So it doesn't matter, as far as I'm concerned, who gets if you will, the accolades for building the temple. But it's rebuilt again. Interestingly, a man comes on the scene by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, and he desecrates that second temple by sacrificing a swine on the altar. Antiochus Epiphanes is called the Antichrist of the Old Testament. And he fits the bill. I think he fits the description to a degree. Not entirely, but to a degree. I need a little drink of coffee here. Now, we have next in line Herod's temple. You will recall in Matthew chapter 24, at the first 2 or 3 verses, that the disciples are walking out of the temple, or out of Jerusalem. They're walking by the temple, and they mention to Jesus, look at these beautiful stones. In other words, look at this magnificent building. And Jesus said, I'm going to tell you, and I'm just paraphrasing, there's not one stone will be left upon another. In other words, that temple would be destroyed. Now we need to understand that that temple was the most magnificent building in the world in that day. Some say the Temple of Diana was a beautiful structure. Probably those 2 buildings would be considered 2 of the most magnificent buildings in the world in that day of Jesus. But Jesus said that it would be destroyed, which it was destroyed in 70 AD. That is Herod's temple. Before I get into that being destroyed, I want to say this. There's some discrepancy. Was Zerubbabel's temple destroyed, or was it only partially destroyed? Did Herod build a brand new temple, or did Herod take what was left of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel's temple, and did he build upon that, refurbish it, and turn it into this magnificent building? By the way, Herod did that so that he would please the Jews, and he would, in essence, by doing that, to a measure, try to keep peace within Israel, because the Romans controlled it, and he wanted to please the Jews, and he wanted to please the Romans. So that's where that temple comes in. Now, we know that in 70 AD, Vespasian, the son of Titus, the son of Vespasian, who was the Caesar in Rome during this time, he sent Titus with his great armies into Jerusalem. The Zealots were creating a lot of problems, and Rome didn't want that. They wouldn't tolerate that. And so in the process, this great army of Titus destroyed the city of Jerusalem, the temple, everything. There are indications from history that the temple was not supposed to be destroyed, but it was. And as Jesus said in 70 AD, when this happened, literally there was not one stone left upon another. It was just totally flattened. So that ended the temple. From 70 AD and the destruction of the temple till today, there has never been another temple in Israel, and specifically in Jerusalem. Now the Jews would like to have one. The Jews would like that, but God has not allowed that to happen yet. Now, what we know is that there's going to be another temple built. I believe that that temple will be started after the rapture. Sal and I, my wife, we have been to Israel a couple of times. The second time we went there, we saw the cornerstones for this new temple. We walked around them, took pictures, touched them. I mean, we've seen them. And they're just waiting the time when this new temple will be built to use these cornerstones. When will that happen? Well, I believe that, first of all, let me go back and give you some history. Let's back up a little bit. Ezekiel 38 and 39. That is called the War of Gog and Magog. Almost everybody uses those terms. If you go back and read Ezekiel 38, you'll see Gog and Magog both mentioned there. And what it amounts to is a Russian Arab coalition that is going to band together and come down against Israel, the mountains of Israel from the north, the Golan Heights and so on. Now, nobody's going to come to Israel's aid, but it says in Ezekiel 38:39 that God is going to destroy this great army with fire and brimstone and various means. It'll be destroyed. And Ezekiel chapter 39, I think it's verse 2, says that when God is finished, there will only be 1/6 of that great army left. So basically, Russia is going to be decimated. The Arabs who band together with them to make this great coalition is going to be decimated. Now, one of the reasons that Israel has not been able to build this next temple for the tribulation period is because of the building called the Dome of the Rock, which is controlled by the Arabs. So they can't build a temple there. But we know from Daniel that there's going to be some type of a peace agreement that the Antichrist is going to establish between Israel and probably the Arabs. But because the Arabs have been decimated, they have no great army anymore, Israel will be free to go in and build their temple on the Temple Mount. Now, are they going to remove the Dome of the Rock? I think that's a great possibility, but there's still room to build the temple without it. But that's the reason that the temple's not being built now. And I'm doing all this because I'm getting to these two verses. So they're going to build the temple. I believe it'll be right after the rapture of the church. I believe the war with Gog and Magog will be probably right after or just before. I've always leaned before the rapture of the church. God didn't tell us, so I can't say for sure. But I believe it'll be in that time frame according to passages of Scripture that I've read and studied. Now, you have here in these verses, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and an angel stood saying, Rise and measure the temple of God. What temple? What temple is he talking about here? Well, here's what I believe. I believe I believe Scripture is clear that this temple is the temple that's going to be built during the tribulation, or just at the beginning of the tribulation period. Right now, we've been to the Temple Institute in Israel. They have the robe all made for the worship by the high priest. They have all of the instruments that it takes to worship in that temple that God laid out, the instruments that God told them to build. They've built all of them. They've got them. The only one thing they don't have, and I'm not going to get into this because this would take a long time, they don't have the Ark of the Covenant. And I believe there's a reason why, and they aren't even building that Ark of the Covenant. And maybe someday I have time to get into that. But I believe that this temple that we see here, that John is measuring, I believe that it is the temple that is going to be built after the rapture, right at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation period. And God has told John to measure it. Now, I want to say this before I go any further. There are 2 more temples to be built. There's a temple that will be built, and you can go back. I can't remember. I know chapter 40, there's maybe through 48. I can't I don't have that in memory. But it's a temple that will be built during the millennial reign of Christ. I want to correct myself. There's that temple's going to be built. And that's described, as I said, in Ezekiel. Now, I'm hesitating here for a minute to get my thoughts here in line. That will be after the tribulation period, that temple. Let me check my notes right here. That will be one of the last 2 temples built. The temple that we got here is one of them, and the temple in the millennial reign of Christ is the other one. This temple that we see here, if you go back and to Revelation chapter 13 and study that, you'll find that the Antichrist is going to set up the abomination of desolation in this temple that we're talking about here in chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. He's going to set up an image that's probably the image of him, and this image is going to be able to talk and move and all kinds of things. And the whole world is going to be made to worship this image in the temple. And by the way, this image will desecrate this temple just as Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated the temple in the Old Testament by sacrificing a swine on it. Now, the Antichrist will eventually stop the sacrifices and everything. That'll be about, well, that will be at the end of the first 3.5 years. And it says here that the holy city will be tread underfoot 40 and 2 months, 3.5 years. That's the last half of the tribulation period. And so that's going to take place. So you have, from where you and I are living today in this time frame, 2 more temples to be built. That's the way I should have worded that at the beginning, and I didn't. But it's this one and the one in Ezekiel that is going to be built during the millennial period of Christ's millennial reign. Now, this temple here, he talks about this city being tread underfoot. I believe that for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period, and again Daniel says there will be this peace treaty of some kind, there will be some kind of a measure of peace. Oh, it won't be peace like we think of peace, but it will be a peace that is going to exist. And I believe it'll be between Israel and the Arabs. And I believe also that the Antichrist will try to propagate a worldly peace. But he really is not into peace. He's into destruction. And what he does at these 40 and 2 months that he talks about, what he does is that in those last 3.5 years, as I've already said, he's going to set up an image of himself in this temple, and the whole world is going to be made to worship him. Now, that is what John's talking about here, and this is what he is measuring, this temple. Now, eventually, when we get to chapter 13, we'll see the Antichrist and the false prophets in the scene there. desecrate this temple. Now, that kind of explains where we're at with this idea of John measuring this temple and what's going on here. And you'll notice that John was told not to measure the outside court, because that is left for the Gentiles. But he measured the rest of that temple. And by the way, I don't know why he measured it. I can't find in Scripture where it tells us, but he did measure it. Now, we come to verse 3. When we come to this verse, and we're very quickly running out of time. What I'm going to do is read. We won't get far into this. Now God tells John, "And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." Now once again, I'll stop here. That 1,260 days, 3.5 years. It is the same length of time as the 40 and the 2 months. Now, in verse 4 he says, "These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth." They're standing before God. He gives them different names here. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. Now I want to read on. "And if any man will hurt them." And what he's saying here, if any man tries to destroy these 2 men, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. So we see that God is, in essence, protecting them while they minister during this time period. Nothing can happen to them. Nothing can happen unless God says it can. Now you'll notice that in what I've read so far, no names have been mentioned. Not one. Not one name. I want to read verse 6. And these have power to shut up heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and they have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. We see they are tremendously, tremendously powerful. God has given them their power. But even if we read on, nowhere are these men given a name. Now, there are various names associated with these men. I'm about out of time, so I can't get into that today. I didn't think I would. But what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to talk about these men and who people say they might be. And then I'm going to tell you who I think they might be. So in the meantime, we're going to have to wait till the next video. thank you for watching today. Thank you for being a part of this Back to the Bible in Our World today. I pray that God's blessing you and encouraging your heart. This is a very wicked world we live in, and yet God, as I've said many, many times, is still in control. And nothing's happening that He's not allowing to take place. So, with that, I trust that you'll have a good week, and that you'll be back when I post the next video on specifically two witnesses. Thank you very much. Thank you again for watching.